The O2F Football Podcast. The voices of tomorrow, here today.
Hey guys, welcome back to the O2F Football Podcast. I'm Nathan, and I'm joined today by Ollie and Kieran.
You alright? It's good to be back.
Hello.
Today we are talking about who England's third choice striker will be and who are the most overrated and surprising Premier League players. Let's get into it.
First up, a bit different to normal, away from the Premier League, but still relating to it, it's international squads. So, who do you guys think should be the third choice England striker? Obviously you have Kane as the number one, but who as the third choice?
Well, I think Calvert-Lewin kind of slots into that number two slot, so you can kind of rule him out. I think he's just been so good for Everton this season. Great height, physical presence, as well as technical ability. Someone that he's proved a lot of people wrong. I think he's proved me wrong. So I didn't think he was that good, but I mean, he's turned out to be absolutely fantastic for Everton and very important, especially with the added creativity they now have. So I think he takes that second spot. For me, the first spot, you've got a few options. Patrick Bamford's been superb, probably the best season of his career so far in the Premier League, which for a striker that got a lot of criticism in that lead side in the Championship for missing a lot of chances, he's certainly done the opposite of that this season. Ollie Watkins, obviously, as an Exeter fan, a bit biased, but I think he's fantastic, and he's someone that just seems to rise to the occasion every time for every club he's at Brentford and Aston Villa. He seems to grow with the level. But for me, it's hard to look past Danny Ings. I just think he's so naturally talented as a striker. And so he's been a bit unlucky with injuries this season. Has been out for a slight period, and maybe you can even argue Che Adams is part of this discussion. But for me, someone that's a goal scorer like Danny Ings has to be included.
I think for me, looking at the two options already, you've got a world-class finisher in Kane and someone who is absolutely ridiculous in the air in Calvert-Lewin for me, and also a very good finisher. So I think the one thing that you might be just missing out on there a bit is a bit of pace. And I think that Ings and, possibly even Callum Wilson are two fantastic players, but I think they also have some similar attributes to the two players or the two strikers that I would take to the Euros. So just based on that, and with a slight hint of my bias as another Exeter City fan, I think I would take Ollie Watkins, just for that different option off the bench. He's not. It's unlikely that he would start or be considered, a second sort of fiddle. But if you look back to, I can't remember if it was the Euros or World Cup, but it was Rashford who was just sort of bursting onto the scene. He was selected in the squad, and I think he was given sort of 15, 20 minutes at the end of one of the games, and he just made such a difference. And I think it just goes to show that if you're looking to have an impact sub, the best thing that you can ask from that sub is that they've got buckets of pace, because it's likely that players who have been playing 70 minutes are going to be more tired than usual. So I think having someone who's got that lightning bit of speed over a short distance will massively, massively help. And I think out of those four, I think for me, Watkins is probably the quickest.
It's strange because this topic and talking point just came to me literally like yesterday. And then when I went online and looked a bit into it, Bamford was actually posed a question on Monday Night Football. So it's clearly something that is a very hot topic at the moment, and one that's obviously been really talked about with Bamford and Watkins. As you said, you got Ings, you got Wilson in there as well, all scoring this season. But the thing with me is Watkins would it be too soon? He's only just came into the Premier League. Yeah, he's hit the ground running. He is scoring goals. Maybe not consistently game after game, although he is more so recently. His form's picked up a lot recently. But I'm just thinking maybe he's a bit too young. I know Rashford did, but I mean, he's been at Man United. He was at a club which is quite, you've got the limelight on you. So I'm thinking maybe Watkins is a bit too soon for him. So I would probably say Bamford. I would normally go to Ings. I know he's been injury prone, so he's not really had that sort of, got the form that he did last season. But Bamford, you know, he's sixth top goal scorer in the Premier League. He's doing really well. Maybe lost a bit of consistency recently. I know he scored the other day, but I mean, in terms of him versus Watkins, Watkins is the most informed currently. But I think Bamford's, you know, been around the scene a bit more longer than Watkins in sort of the Championship. And so I think he's probably got the more, you know, the sort of higher caliber, sort of the reputation and a bit more experience to really push him into that third spot ahead of Watkins. But no doubt that if Watkins keeps up his development, definitely, you know, 2 years' time, he will definitely be replacing Bamford, as long as Bamford, you know, doesn't all of a sudden become the next Harry Kane.
I think one thing that Watkins has got in sort of an advantage over the other strikers is he's versatile. He can play out wide, he can play in the 10. I understand probably wouldn't be playing that position for England, especially considering you've got Maddison, Grealish and Foden. But with Rashford can play up front. So can Watkins play out on that left? Yes. But can Bamford do it? No. Can Ings do it? No, probably not. So with Watkins, you do have that versatility and the fluidity that Southgate has tended to like with England, with Sancho and Sterling and Rashford and sort of Kane in the middle, but everyone else kind of floating about. So that does give me right. For me, it's still Danny Ings, again, natural goal scorer. England experience, which probably does give some sort of advantage in his time. He's played for England. He knows what it's like to wear that shirt and play for the country, whereas Bamford, I don't think Watkins ever played in his youth. I'm not sure if Bamford did, probably did.
Bamford played a couple games, I think, for under-21s, I think, and then he played for Ireland or someone, I think, under-18 or something. But yeah, neither Watkins, Bamford obviously had no caps for the first team, and Wilson 4 and Ings only 3 caps, which I thought was going to be more.
Yeah. Well, would that maybe lend Tammy Abraham an advantage there? I mean, he's played for England in some big games. I remember his debut was against Brazil, you know, alongside Dominic Solanke, who certainly isn't in the discussion, but if Abraham has been there and done it really for England. Well, not done it, but he's definitely been there. And he plays for Chelsea, so he's used to playing in big games. And I know he's not had the best season at all this year. Do you think that kind of lends him a little bit of an advantage, considering he knows the squad, he's been in around it before?
I think the problem with Abraham is you can't guarantee that he will start for Chelsea, in my opinion. And I think when it comes to picking the right squad, you have to go for the players who are in form, the players who've played consistently throughout the season and rarely play badly. So I think for me, you look at Watkins, Wilson, Calvert-Lewin, Kane, people like that. When fit, they will be the talisman, the main man up front, the striker. It's pretty much a guarantee, I'd say, just because of how crucial they are to that team. Whereas you look at Chelsea, and Thomas Tuchel has very much been swapping and changing around that front two. I think he's began with Abraham. He's looked at playing Giroud there, Werner there, Hudson-Odoi, I'm pretty sure, was floating around there against Spurs. So based on that, I'm not sure, unless he's able to get a consistent run of games, which in my opinion, I'm not too sure about, because the 2 games that Chelsea have won, I don't think he's started the game. So it's likely that Tuchel will lean more towards Giroud if he wanted that sort of target man finisher, allowing the people like Werner and Hudson-Odoi to do the running around him. So I'd say 4 people that we've sort of mentioned and nominated already have an advantage there, regardless of what's going on or what's already happened in the England squad as to who Southgate has picked before. I'd be surprised if he is considering if he doesn't take him, but at the same time not. I think if it was me in that position, I don't think I would. But then I think Southgate is very much the manager who plays players that he trusts. Which is why I think it was so difficult for Grealish to get into the team, because he had his set players and he almost didn't want to change that. So I am worried for a couple of the players who maybe deserve to be in the squad but don't have any caps, just because the impression that they've directly made on Southgate is not as prominent as players like Tammy Abraham.
I agree. I think for far too long, and it's been something I've been critical for the England team for a while, England seem to pick big names over the talent. I think we've far too consistently seem to pick the players if they've got a good reputation rather than their form. And I think Abrahams will be in the England team. He's in it now, and I think he will be next time because he's one of the so-called big names up front in recent years. I know he's not the biggest like a Kane, but he's definitely a much bigger name in terms of Bamford or Watkins. So I think he will get picked. But I think that's why England sometimes do falter and they sometimes stutter, because they're picking players not based on their form. And I think if you were to pick players based on their form, Abraham wouldn't even be in the discussion. It's why his name isn't down on my list when I named it out, because the likes of Bamford and Watkins are doing 10 times better than Abrahams is. So I think he will be picked, and I think it will be a letdown because players, like Kieran said, won't get in, which deserve to be in, and they need to get their foot in the door so they can break their way in. But I just think, Southgate isn't the sort of player to risk it like he hasn't really done with Grealish, which I think is a massive letdown and really bad, to be honest, for the future of the team.
Yeah, I think Southgate values the sort of people, the whole team spirit. He wants a similar team. At 23 needs to not have too much change to it. That's why he's been very loyal to Trippier when perhaps things weren't going his way at Tottenham. He's been very loyal to Ross Barkley when he was at Chelsea, and certain players like that. He likes the team spirit. I think he values players coming up through the youth system of England. So players that have played for the 21s like Tammy Abraham, Marcus Rashford, they've had a lot of time together, a lot of this squad, in not just in senior football, but also when they're coming through together. So I do think that Abraham probably does have a good chance because he's come up through that system. Obviously, Southgate was England under 21 manager, so he'd have seen a lot of these players in their development. Players are going to miss out. It's the nature of the game. There's 23 players that can get selected. I can guarantee there's going to be 4 or 5 that we're not going to be happy with. But for me, that third striker slot belongs to Danny.
All right, so up next, we're going to be talking about our surprise players from this season so far. We've looked at possible top sixes. We've looked at transfers that maybe we don't agree with. But now, midway through the season, I thought it was a good idea to maybe take a look at some of those players who we didn't have very high expectations for at the start of the season. But as we've watched a few games, they've gone and proved us wrong. So I'll start, I guess. So firstly, a team that I guess has surprised me and surprised everyone has been Aston Villa. I think the new signings have done very well, but you also have to give a lot of credit to the players who last season were battling relegation and have come back and are almost better players because they're now surrounded by, I think, more better players. So for that matter, or for that reason, I'm going to go for Ezri Konsa. For me, he's massively stepped up this season. I watched a fair few Villa games last season just because someone who I live with was a Villa fan, so it was often a game that we'd watch consistently. And he looked pretty bang average at best, I would say. Never really did anything amazing and would often be caught out for certain goals and things like that. But the signings that have been made have obviously had an impact on him because he looks like a different player now, in my opinion. Most recently, the Arsenal game, Aston Villa scored inside 2 minutes, and for the next 88 minutes, probably more pressure in the last 20, but for the majority of that game, it was about holding on to that lead and defending and possibly playing a bit deeper. And alongside Tyrone Mings, who's got that hefty price tag that's attached to his name as well, I think Konsa has almost gone under the radar as someone who you didn't really have high expectations for at the start of the season, just based on the performances that himself and Villa defenders put in last season, where you always felt like, Villa are ahead, but they'll concede. It's just what they do. This season, I think it's been very different. Although they've added and bolstered that attacking front line with Watkins, Traore and Barkley, they've also gone the other way. And they concede way, way less goals. And I think that's a large part of why they are where they are at the moment. And I think Konsa has gone under the radar and actually been a massive part of their resurgence up the table.
Yeah, I think it's been a good season for him so far. I mean, he's only 23. You feel like some of these players are a little bit older, English as well. And we were talking about the England national team not that long ago. And, England's centre-back position is not the strongest. John Stones has come out and made himself one of the 2 centre-backs. But Harry Maguire's had his mistakes. Joe Gomez is injured. And then, Connor Cody, we'll probably talk about him later, is perhaps not having the best season. So Ezri Konsa might be, a kind of dark horse for the England squad. He's been pretty good. And in the Aston Villa team, he's working with a manager that he trusts in Dean Smith, who's with him at Brentford. That's why he was brought in to Aston Villa originally. And some players, it takes time to grow into the Premier League. And and get used to how it is, the intensity, the pressure. And I think he's definitely done that alongside Tyrone Mings. So not only are they developing as individual players, they're developed as a partnership, and that's helped Aston Villa have the start they have. And then they've got Emi Martinez in goal, and probably one of the best goalkeepers in the Premier League. So that stability as compared to last season, I can't remember who they had last season. Was it Pepe Reina? Was it for
Pepe Reina or not Nyland as well?
Nyland. After
Ethan obviously got injured.
Yeah. So for a long time it was Nyland in goal, I think, before Reina came in. So that's not the most stability, and so that you don't have to worry about the goalkeeper anymore. So it allows Conte a bit more freedom into taking a few more risks because he trusts who's behind it. So I think that has been that's a good shout for most surprising player for sure.
I think the whole entire Aston Villa team have obviously been doing above expectations. And I think often a majority of the team that's overlooked because you look at the likes of Grealish and you look at the likes of Watkins and, those sort of players doing really well. And yeah, most people probably think centre-back Mings at Aston Villa. But, I think that partnership at the back has been key to their success just as much as Grealish linking up with the attacking forces in the squad. So, I think that's a good shout.
And just on that, if Aston Villa keep it up, I know we did our top 6, and none of us included them. Just out of interest, if they were to keep up this kind of form where they seem to win 2 out of every 3 games, where do you think Villa, what's the highest possible place they could finish?
I could finish 6th. I think if they keep it up, and I mean everyone's been so inconsistent this season, there's a good chance they finish it. I'll have them levelling out at probably 8th or 7th. Probably 8th. I feel like Aston Villa probably I'm more likely going to finish 8th. But I mean, who knows? Arsenal, Tottenham have all been inconsistent. They might end up in 6th.
I mean, as form's going, Tottenham, Arsenal, everyone's a bit all over the place at the minute. So it could be anywhere, couldn't they? They could finish 10th, they could finish 6th. They could even, do a surprise one and finish 5th. So I don't think you can really place a bet on that one. But yeah, I think they'll be around 7th, 8th sort of position. Great season for them, no matter where they finish in that sort of top 10.
For me, this is a player that everyone kind of knew he was talented, but he had a few really rough injuries, and he's really changed the fortunes around a certain club season. It's Arsenal season, and for me, Emil Smith-Rowe has really surprised and caught the eye this season for me. I think he was someone that he was out at Huddersfield and got a bad injury, then went out to Leipzig and got a bad injury. Everyone knew he was a talented player, but certainly when you're thinking of young players that are going to burst onto the scene, you're not thinking Emil Smith-Rowe, but he's been absolutely fantastic this season for Arsenal, really alongside sort of Saka and a resurgent Lacazette, has been just one of the most important players for them. He's got a few assists. He's not scored yet in the Premier League, which surprised me, but I'm sure the goals are going to come from him soon. But yeah, he's just been he's a really exciting player. And again, we link it back to the national team. It's not a position that England perhaps need, but I mean, the more the merrier. He's another great option for Southgate come the summer.
Yeah, I think that's a great shout. Almost someone that you don't think of, but you should, just because of how important he has been to Arsenal's resurgence. You almost just associate him as being a good player, an established player. But at the start of this season, you would not even consider him being a regular starter in the Arsenal team, I don't think. And after watching him, a fair few times, at moments, he just makes them tick. Sometimes it doesn't happen because he is still young and he is still learning how he can impact games in other ways. But just an example of what I saw from him. Obviously, it wasn't the stiffest of competition in West Brom, but the goal that Saka scored was, it was trademark Arsenal. It was that one-touch, quick passing, moving football that they've become so known for. And so many goals under Wenger came like that. The one from Wilshere against Norwich comes to mind. And this one was a similar reincarnation of that, and he was at the absolute heart of it. He's someone who, when he picks up the ball and moves it on, he doesn't stay still. And I know, that's like generic trademark number 1 rule of what you're told in kids football and youth football and as you grow up is when you pass the ball, move to find space and ask for the ball back. But the way he does it is so elegant, I'd say, and it always seems to be the right space that he picks up in the right moment, in the right pocket. And then he seems to have no aspiration to go backwards. I think that's actually a very rare trait with certain players at the moment, is their ability to just pass sideways because they're they're scared of losing the ball, losing possession. But when you're that young, what have you got to lose? Every opportunity, every mistake you make can just be a learning curve. So I think he probably feels like there's no pressure on him almost, which allows him that freedom to roam forward and pass forward and take those chances, take those risks. And so when they do come off, it looks brilliant. And if they don't come off, then you can at least say he's trying. And I think that's a really great quality to have and a really good shout for a surprising player.
I think he's evidence of a positive for Arsenal this season. Normally when everything's been going so wrong for them, it's been quite a good opportunity for the youngsters to come up with no pressure on them because, they haven't got to fit into a winning team. They've kind of got, if they lose, they were already losing with the main stars in it anyway. So I think it's allowed the youth players to come in with kind of the lack of weight on their shoulders to really shine. I think that's been proven by a lot of the youngsters probably being the best players at Arsenal this season, which is rare because you normally rely on the older ones with sort of the more experience to get them out of these tough positions. But it's kind of the youth that is actually doing that for Arsenal, and he is just one example of a great youngster coming through in the Premier League at the moment. Okay, so the final surprising player of the season, it could have been anyone. A lot of players have had great seasons. For me, Cavani at Man United, everyone was dissing him, and I said from the start, and he's done well, but he's not my chosen one. He's a world-class striker, so you can't say he's been that surprising in the fact he's scoring goals. Souček at West Ham's been great, and I mean, the new signing, I know he's only just joined them, but Lingard's had a fantastic start at West Ham. But my player, I know I said you can't really pick world-class players, and this player is a world-class player, but his form in recent games and last couple of weeks has been magnificent. It's Ilkay Gundogan at Man City. I think he's been absolutely phenomenal this season. He's doing something that maybe he hasn't always done, is get goals. He's got more goals already this season than he has in the last two combined. So that just puts together how well he is doing in front of goal. Obviously, the lack of a striker, he's kind of taken his own in recent weeks to kind of get them goals, to get them wins for the team. But he's just been exceptional in the middle of the park for Man City, and I'm saying he's all over the pitch. He's scoring goals, he's creating goals. I mean, he's been marvellous.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right there. I think the obvious thing you can pick out is the goal scoring and the chance creating and the assists. But you've got to find yourself in those positions. Of course, the goals against Liverpool were tap-ins, and he obviously missed a penalty. But the first thing that I think you're told as a striker is, if you're missing opportunities but you're getting in the right positions to have those, that's a positive, and you can build from that. And he's been getting in those positions. And it's not just been tap-ins there. They've also been goals from the edge of the box. He always seems to pick up really good positions where he can have a go at goal. And I think at Dortmund, he was known to score and set up a few goals. I think he sort of fell into the background with Man City at times with being out of favour or being injured, and you sometimes almost forgot that he was there, especially with, I think what Pep has done is a lot of the time you'll see one of those 5-6 star wingers almost playing in a central midfield role and then pushing on forward. As long as you have that holding midfielder in Rodri or Fernandinho, it's okay. But he's made it so difficult not to pick him just by how much of a contribution he's having to Pep Guardiola and the team. And I think a large part of that could also be down to the absence of Kevin De Bruyne. It's very possible that because of him not playing, it frees up more space to drive from the midfield. And I think in particular as well, when it comes to how Man City have been setting up in certain games, when you have in possession that back three, it allows an extra player in midfield as one of the fullbacks, which means you've almost got two there, especially if Rodri or Fernandinho is alongside him. So at times, Gundogan, you could argue, is playing in the 10 role, the attacking midfield role, which is why he's able to pop up with so many goals. And I think going forward, at least, he's probably going to continue getting those goals and assists. I think, like you said, obviously the lack of Kevin De Bruyne in the squad is obviously giving him the opportunity, but also with David Silva leaving, that's opened up the position for him to kind of, get them goals out. Otherwise, De Bruyne was getting, David Silva was getting, obviously Foden is now getting on that as well. But I think the missing of those two players, obviously one leaving, one being injured, has enabled him to, prove that he is worth starting, and he's definitely done that.
Yeah, I think Gundogan is a great shout. I think He's someone that we forgot probably because of his injury. He's got a horrible injury record similar to Smith Rowe, but he's proven that he's a world-class player. I think people probably wouldn't have him in that regard last season. I don't think we're talking as Gundogan as a world-class player last season. I don't think we're doing it the season prior. He's really come in and proven himself, and it's kind of like you forgot about me. Why has everyone forgot about me? I'm genuinely very good, and he's proven to everyone that he is a player that is worthy of playing for Manchester City and is worthy of being in the best team in the Premier League. Right, so going from a positive with the most surprising players in the Premier League, we're going to go to a slightly controversial topic. Who are the most overrated players in the Premier League? Now, I'm sure everyone's got an opinion on this. I wasn't too sure on mine because I have that general belief that if you play in the Premier League, you're very good at football. I can't argue with that, even if your form is bad. But I had to pick someone. And I was thinking, again, a lot of this discussion seemed based around the England national team in my head. And I was looking at a player that a lot of people wanted to start at centre-back for the next Euros, and I looked at Connor Cody, and Wolves haven't had the best season. I just feel he's been a bit of a liability at the back this season, and I just don't really see him being the type of centre. I mean, a lot of people saying he was going to sign for Liverpool and be the answer for centre back there. I don't see how he is. I don't see it with Connor Cody. He's a standard Premier League centre half, not really a big player for me. I just think he's a little bit overrated, which is the whole point of this discussion. Do you guys agree?
I think with Cody in that first season, when Wolves came into the Premier League and in the Championship as well, he was immense, and he set himself that standard where it feels like if you do drop beneath it, everyone is questioning it a bit. Or are you actually that good? Can you consistently do it at that level? I think it's been a weird one for Cody because if anything, I think he would rather play for the England national team every week because that seems to be where he has his success. He scored, made his debut most recently in the set of friendlies. And I think he's a very important part of playing a back five, especially in Southgate's eyes, as it looks like that's how he wants to line up. Obviously this season, Wolves and Nuno have tinkered around a bit with their formation, and I think a lot of that has been down to Jimenez not having the wing backs, no crosses. You don't really have a vocal point, so Cody sort of had to adapt to playing in a back four when he's been playing in a back five for years, and I think understandably it's been quite difficult for him, but I think it looks now like they've reverted back to the back five now that they have that vocal point who came in January, and William Jose. So I'm hopeful that we will see Cody sort of back to his best in a back five, because if we do start with a back five, I think I would like to see him play in that central role because he's got the most experience doing it. And I think when he does play there, next to two, fingers crossed, quicker centre-backs, he will thrive again.
I think that I'd just have to disagree. I personally do. I think he's a great centre-back, and he might not be having the best season, but Wolves as a whole aren't really. But I think he's great. I do think he's probably one of the best central centre-backs that England have. I'm a big fan of his, and he's a player for me that I feel like could walk into even like Man United's defence. I know they haven't got the best defence, but I would like to have him at Man U. I just think he's a solid, strong player when he's in form, and everyone goes through dips. And obviously, if the whole team's doing bad, he's going to be just like everyone else and not going to be performing as well as he can do. And I think that's credit to their form in the last few seasons, really, that they've been overachieving maybe, and maybe realisation with a couple players leaving has kind of hit them hard. But no, I think it's maybe a blip in form, but overrated. No, I just don't see it. I think Connor Cody's a great centre-back and, worthy of his England place.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough one because I think he's not a one-trick pony, but that's his thing. He's a centre-back. He's in the centre of that back three. And that's him. That's Connor Cody. That's what he's been redefined as. He used to be a midfielder back when he was at Liverpool early on in his career, but he found his room. He's found his position in centre-back in that middle. I just don't see, when you say he could fit into any team, I don't think he's any better than anyone they've got at Man United. I don't think, I know it was just hypothetical, but I don't think he fits into any top six side unless they definitely deploy three at the back. The only team I can see him going to is Spurs, maybe, because he seems like that sort of player. They've already got kind of Eric Dyer, and Connor Cody is a slight upgrade on that. But for me, I think the reason I say they're rated, it's just because a little bit too much of a one-trick pony for me, possibly in that he's only can really do that to a great length. Maybe he's been a bit messed around by injuries. He's certainly a good player, but maybe not as good as other people say.
Okay, so the second most overrated and my most overrated. It took me a while to get to this conclusion, but in hindsight, I should have got to it a lot quicker. Someone that you'd think would be scoring a lot of goals or should be scoring much more than they currently are and they had done in previous seasons. They're 77th in the top goal scoring charts for in the Premier League. It's Richarlison at Everton. Now, I know a lot of people have said a lot about him. Some saying that, I'm pretty sure he very nearly got a transfer away in the window. And some people say, he's really good. He could go on and play for a really big team. I'm pretty sure someone in Spain really wanted him. But 2 goals compared to, I think it was 13 in the previous season. I know he's obviously got Calvert-Lewin now around him, and he's got him getting most of the goals, and you've got James Rodriguez coming into that team. But you would have thought that sort of talent would be boosting him and making him get more goals. And I know he came close against Manchester United with that sort of fluke sort of curl that just went past the post. But 2 goals, 77th. It's just not good enough.
Yeah, I actually, that's a great shout, to be fair. But can't think of why I didn't think of that. Richarlison's a player that, is a sort of controversial character. He can wind people up. Me being a Liverpool fan as well, he does kind of get under the skin a little bit. That tackle on Thiago early in the season was disgusting. But he is a good player. There's a reason Barcelona wanted him. He's a good player. He's a good footballer. But yeah, he's not delivered this season at all.
Shout Barcelona, people got it wrong.
He's definitely, he's not really delivered this season. Is he the type of player that maybe wants to be the vocal point? He's not the vocal point anymore. There's 2 players there that are already more important than him in an attacking sense. So maybe he's suffered from not being the guy for Everton and the attention being off him. I think he's someone that likes the pressure, likes to be in that intense environment where now that pressure's lifted now. He's got Calvert-Lewin, he's got James Rodriguez. Really, that should benefit him. Maybe he's just not that player. He does strike as a bit of a maverick sort of player, with a big character. So I think he is a bit overrated, to be fair. Yeah, no, I agree with that.
Would you say that? I know you said that he's good and he's talented, but the Everton rejected £85 million for him in the summer from Barcelona. Surely you would take that £85 million for Richarlison. I know I would. I'd take that at a drop of a hat. That's way over the price tag I pay for him. I know that money seems to be nothing in football. It did compared to the pandemic. Now it's definitely changed that, and I reckon he'd go for nothing compared to that now. But £85 million. Everton surely must be regretting that decision.
I think it's possible. Absolutely. I do think maybe at the time that was the right decision to reject it at the time, because he was, as Nathan said, the guy at Everton. He was the player you'd look to for that inspiration. But I think he was somebody who I considered for this. I decided against it just basically because I think a lot of the seasons before, when Everton have really struggled in terms of finding out a suitable striker in place of Romelu Lukaku since he left, and Richarlison for a while was actually playing as that vocal point, as that number 9. So I think that could possibly explain why he doesn't have as many goals this season as he did last season. I still think he's a very good player. I just don't think he's quite had the opportunities to score this season as he has last season. I think he's arguably had to do a bit more defensive work, which either he is not the biggest fan of, or that's sort of what he's been told to do by Ancelotti. There's no doubt he has the ability to score goals. It's just a lot of those goals were coming in the penalty box. He was sort of that poacher finisher. When the ball drops in that box, the amount of times he would poke that in or poke that goalwards was staggering. And I think now Calvert-Lewin's in that role, and understandably, because he's excelled. So you think of Calvert-Lewin's equaliser most recently against Manchester United. That's the sort of goal that Richarlison was scoring. But now you've got someone who's better, younger, who can maybe do it more efficiently and effectively, which is why Richarlison has somewhat sort of been shifted out to that left-hand side, which arguably he's played there before, but I think he prefers, and I think he plays better as a number 9, which probably explains, or could explain at least, why he's not been able to get as many goals as he had to again adapt to playing in a different position to accommodate someone else.
Saying that, I just personally think when you've got the players that they brought in, like Rodriguez, that it would set up him to at least get more than 2 goals. I mean, this is so far, if it stays like this, his lowest scoring campaign in an Everton shirt. And I mean, the last 2 seasons, he's got 13 goals consistently. So, I mean, I don't know. I just think he is. Yeah, maybe he was good. And I probably remember myself thinking he was a quality player, maybe a season and a half ago, 2 seasons ago. But looking at it now, I think, maybe he was a bit overhyped then.
So for our final selection for the overrated players, as Nathan alluded to, I do think that the term overrated is a bit out of character or wrong, because anyone who's in the Premier League deserves to be, then they're obviously a good footballer. But my selection is also similar to that of Cody and Richarlison, in that arguably they've been at a high level of performance in the past few seasons, and maybe this season it hasn't quite been that for them. And I've gone for Christian Pulisic. I just think that when he had that spell at the end of last season where he was fantastic, and I saw a lot of people comparing him to, prime Chelsea Eden Hazard. And at the time, the goals and how he was playing and how he was performing were similar. He was having major impacts on games. He was winning points for Chelsea. And I remember he suffered an injury in, I think it was the FA Cup final against Arsenal, where I think he did some damage to his hamstring. And although he did have some time off to recover, he's come back and he's made a few appearances, and it seems like he's just sort of lost that sharpness, and other players in other attacking positions have edged ahead of him in terms of both Lampard's eyes and now. I just think the Hazard comparisons now were deluded, and I don't think that he is quite as good as everyone says he is.
Yeah, it's a difficult one with Pulisic, because I feel like he's a very good player, definitely a high level footballer, but he hasn't quite been the player he was last season when he first came in. I just saw that he got 1 goal and 1 assist in, I think it's 15 Premier League games, which isn't good enough, quite simply, if you want to maintain your spot in any team, let alone Chelsea, where they do have a lot of attacking talent. Regardless of what you think of Timo Werner so far, he is a good player. Callum Hudson-Odoi has sort of became found himself in a new energy now, and has been fantastic. So it's a tough one for him. I think he can get it back, but I just think, I think I'm kind of inclined to agree that maybe, again, what you guys said for the Cody thing, I think it's just maybe a blip in form for Pulisic, but he definitely will be back.
Yeah, I mean, clearly the stats show that he's not hitting the highs that he should be. But I mean, I could be wrong. I'm pretty sure I'm not. He's worked under Tuchel before, so maybe he's the man to bring him back to his best. But yeah, he's got to improve. But one player, this is just, I know we're only meant to say one overrated player, but this one player just popped up. Gareth Bale. No one mentioned him, and I didn't mention him. I didn't think of him, but I know a lot of people say he's overrated for quite a while. But I just want to chuck him into this conversation and say definitely Gareth Bale as well.
I think if we want to have this conversation, it's like a good lengthy one, because really, other than the times he's played for Wales, we can't really say that Bale's had a consistent run in any team for a while now. And if I'm honest, yeah, he's absolutely past his best. In terms of what Mourinho wants from those wide players, he doesn't quite fit the mould. And at the end of the day, I hate to say this, I really do, because I loved him when he played for us back in 2013, and I don't want this run to tarnish his Spurs legacy. But at the end of the day, I think it was a morale signing. It was definitely a Levy signing, that's for sure. If it was down to Mourinho, I don't think we would have brought him in at all. But Daniel Levy at the top of the chain loves him so much, and it's obviously a good PR move as well, I think, to bring back arguably one of the best players to play for your club, who's then gone away and been successful and won loads of trophies. But in terms of being overrated, I almost don't think he's quite had the minutes to show that yet, in terms of how much he's played, as opposed to the people that we've mentioned who've played a fair bit and just not performed. He's played and not performed and then been left out of the team for weeks. So I don't think he's overrated, because I think that's just his level now, unfortunately. You know, injuries are catching up with him a bit. He's getting slightly older. He doesn't have that electric pace that he once had. I think the only thing he sort of brings is a winning mentality.
I mean, we've named a lot of players here as overrated, and like you said, it can be quite harsh to label them as such, as overrated, because they all are professional footballers. But, you know, if you agree or disagree or whatever, just pop a comment down and just let us know if you think these are, or if you have your own ideas. So it'll be interesting to know what you guys think.
And that wraps up the 1-2 Football podcast. Thanks for listening. Before you go, make sure to check out our Facebook at 1-2 Football and Twitter and Instagram all at 1-2 Football UK. And take a look at 12football.com for all the latest written pieces from our growing list of contributors from around the world. We'll be back next week.